Hey, welcome to Horns Up. And this time, as you guys would have probably read on the episode description, it's time for another All A's albums. And naturally, if it's an All A's albums, that means we have our friend from Bangalore, Anurag Tagat, with us. Anurag, how are you doing? How is this lockdown treating you?
Well, it's yeah, it's going all right, really. I think Bangalore has been sort of decent that way, or at least somewhat decent, better than Bombay. So it's been yeah, do your weekly grocery runs and but yeah, still try to stay at home as much as possible, which is already a given considering freelance life.
Yeah. For all freelancers, it's like the lockdown was pretty much an extension. And if you're an introverted freelancer, then oh my God, is this a boon or is this a bane? We really don't know. We really can't say. Anyways, on Ole's album today, we're going to be doing an album that Anurag himself suggested. It's by a band called Mastodon, and it's their fourth studio album called Crack the Sky. Now, before we get into actually discussing the album itself, I want to just quickly go around the room and kind of get you guys to answer what your exposure to Mastodon was when you heard this album. Peter, can we start off with you?
So I'm going to take a little time for this because this album released in 2009. So 2 years prior to that, at the Dubai Desert Rock, this was February, I think, March. Yeah, Mastodon were part of the lineup, and back then at the Dubai Desert Rock, they had like a metal day and a rock day. So metal day was stacked, of course, headlined by Iron Maiden. I've already talked to death about that and meeting them there. There was Prodigy, there was Chimera, not Chimera, but there was Junkyard Groove, surprisingly, who opened that. And bang in the middle was Mastodon. Now, I wasn't like the biggest Mastodon fan back then. I'd heard Leviathan that had released then, but they really put on a great show. But consider this, like you have a 45-minute set, early evening, uh, so it's still like kind of bright and stuff like that. And plus the band back then was like, straight player set, no interaction, nothing else, which for me was like, okay, wow, compared to all the other bands that played there. But they really like stuck out in there, considering later on in the night I watched Iron Maiden. 2 years later, when this album came out, this was still the phase where you had limited resources and stuff like that, so you'd actually like listen to one album at a time. And oh my god, man, I don't think anything prepared me, what I saw live, to what I was going to hear, because I was like, what the hell are these guys on? I mean, I think I spent like, if not weeks, sometimes months, just listening to this album back to back. And there was just so much. Each time you listen to the album, you'll discover another part and you're like, okay, where did this come from, kind of thing. So yeah, man, I was really, really happy when Anurag suggested this album. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Anurag, what prompted you to select Crack the Sky, and what was your exposure to Mastodon like before or once you heard this album?
Yeah, well, before this, I was I'd heard I think Blood Mountain as well as Leviathan. So like I was pretty familiar with the albums and just like how I guess sort of ornate they were in their style. And I think I discovered Mastodon the same time I discovered Baroness. So it was really something. And but I think before that, the first Mastodon track I really dug was through a film soundtrack. I think The Wolf is Loose
Yeah.
was on the Saw 3 soundtrack. So yeah, it was quite interesting. So I liked The Wolf is Loose, and then I'd heard Colony of Birchmen on another soundtrack, I believe, and it was quite interesting. Like I really liked the kind of intensity that Mastodon brought. So, but yeah, what led to choosing Crack the Sky, I suppose, was I think just at the time, sort of like being exposed to Mastodon for those two previous albums, and then like sort of anticipating this album. That was I guess that's part of what like really hyped it up. And then when the reviews started coming out and all those sort of things, like I still remember like I posted about it in 2009, I suppose, that some critics had called it one of the best metal albums of the decade. And now that I look back on the decade, uh, I would I would more or less agree that it was definitely one of the best like metal albums of the past 10 years that it released in.
Hmm. Well, I'll be completely honest here. I really didn't give a shit about Mastodon until Crack the Sky. And that may be because I don't know, I never really got into that genre of metal that early on itself. So yeah, it could be that. I also thought Mastodon were incredibly pretentious. And they weren't true, right? So all of that being said, but shout out to kvltsite.com, on which somebody, I forget who it was that posted it, said that everyone has to check out this album and it's definitely worth a listen. And I gave it a shot. I didn't like it at first listen. I remember I was hanging out with the guys from Bhayanak Mod Stroke Red Cube. Big shout out to them, and we got into pretty much of a argument as where I was largely just chided for my ignorance.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Let's keep it at that, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that Crack the Sky was my first Mastodon album, and since then I've gone ahead and heard not all, like at least almost all of their albums, etc. And which leads me to the next question, which we have to really address here on Horns Up before we get into this album itself. And we've discussed it before already on our Metal or Not episode with Albatross, but I just want to get a quick reading of the room here. On that episode of Metal or Not, we had kind of agreed in majority or in totality that Mastodon are not a metal band anymore, but they did have metal leanings. And I still will agree that until Crack the Sky, Mastodon were a metal band. Yeah, do you guys agree, Anurag?
Well, yeah, man. I mean, like that was the perception that came with Crack the Sky, that Mastodon was sort of reaching out into a space that would, I guess, put them in with other bands, and maybe I don't know, like I guess a band just reaches that point where they say that we want this album to take us to arenas, or we want this album to take us to stadiums, we want this album to make our font size bigger on festival lineups, stuff like that. So I definitely feel like there was, I mean, they just do it tastefully, right? No band, like, I guess, willfully puts that sort of thing out there, but they do
Like,
it
let's write a
tastefully.
pop song. Come on.
No, I think they did that with the next couple of albums they released.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right down to the music videos with all the twerking and everything. But yeah, like
That was an awesome song, though.
yeah,
For
Motherlode.
all the
Yeah.
flack it gets.
Yeah.
What an insane hook. Anyways, we're not discussing that album.
Oh yeah.
In one word, Mastodon, metal or not, during the time of Crack the Sky?
Yes, still metal for me.
Okay, and Peter, where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I agree, and I can't, for the life of me, recall what I had said on the Metal or Not episode. But I would largely agree that up to this point they were metal. Post this, like I was also scratching my head, and like I'm gonna be upfront here. I'm gonna be gushing about this album just like I was when I was like in my early 20s, listening to it all over again, and that's the beautiful part about like listening to this album to do this episode. So yeah.
Okay.
Last word, Animesh.
Yeah. I set it up. I don't have any other word to say.
Okay.
Yes, they are. I agreed. Mastodon were a metal album. Mastodon were a metal band until Crack the Sky. So let's get into Crack the Sky then. Here are some quick factoids. Crack the Sky, fourth studio album by Mastodon, released on March 24, 2009 through Reprise Records. According to an interview on the DVD, The Making of Crack the Sky, this album represents the element of ether, which is represented by all the souls and spirits of all things, and that's a theme closely related to the context of the album. It kind of follows in line with the other elements of sorts that have uh, themed Mastodon's earlier works. What's really interesting is because it's a theme, naturally, there must be some sort of a story progression or it's a concept album or something of that sort. When asked in multiple interviews, Taylor said that the record would tell a story dealing variously with the art aesthetics of Tsarist Russia, astral travel, out of body experiences, and Stephen Hawking's theories on wormholes. And I would love to read this quote out. It's widely available on Wikipedia, but if you haven't heard this, then boy, are you in for a treat. And the quote goes, there is a paraplegic, and the only way that he can go anywhere is if he astral travels. He goes out of his body into outer space, and a bit like Icarus, he goes too close to the sun, burning off the golden umbilical cord that is attached to his solar plexus. So he is in outer space and he is lost. He gets sucked into a wormhole. He ends up in the spirit realm and he talks to spirits, telling them that he is not really dead. So they send him to the Russian cult. They use him in a divination and they find out his problem. They decide they're going to help him. They put his soul inside Rasputin's body. Rasputin goes to usurp the Tsar and he is murdered. The two souls fly out of Rasputin's body through the crack in the sky. And Rasputin is the wise man that is trying to lead the child home to his body because his parents have discovered him by now and think that he is dead. Rasputin needs to get him back into his body before it's too late, but they end up running into the devil along the way, and the devil tries to steal their souls and bring them down. There are some obstacles along the way. End quote. What were Mastodon fucking smoking?
So this is something I looked up, and I remember this incident quite well at the 2007 VMA Music Awards, where Brett Hines had a brawl, and you can read all about it. But it resulted in him being hospitalized with a life-threatening brain hemorrhage. And I was reading up where it says these songs that he was writing, he began, like, once he went back home, it started like reflecting the spiral dizziness that he felt in his brain. And I was like, yeah, I mean, you get that kind of like trippy thing, but yeah, I don't think like drugs can do this kind of shit to you, man.
Drugs definitely did some shit. Medical drugs, prescribed medication.
That's true. I mean, as much as it's got like this very psychedelic, born out of a trip sort of story, or maybe just just how it was conceived. Like, I mean, I don't know if it was tagged on for later, but the fact that it has like so much emotion attached to it, like how it's dedicated to Bran's sister, so who committed suicide. Like, I mean, I think like those sort of things, like I guess slightly make people think about it differently, or maybe they get more confused about it. They'll be like, how are they writing this very clearly stoner story, but also injecting so much of emotion into it. So yeah, I think that was quite that was one of the things that struck me about this album.
Yep. It's one of those albums really where, there's so much context that you're made aware of even before you start listening to it. And I think what we did so far, which is set this album up in over such a long period of time, which is very unlike how we generally begin our Always episodes, where we just directly start off with the songs itself. I think we had to do this in this manner. But anyways, that being done, that being said, gentlemen, should we begin? Always.
Right, let's do this.
Alrighty. Beginning with track number 1. It's Oblivion. Peter, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, so the track, right, with the opening riff, if you heard like Mastodon, you kind of feel it. And then you don't realize once those galloping riffs like right hit you, boom, right? So that's one of the things that take you from the start. Again, like the opening lyrics where he says like, I flew beyond the sun before it was time. And, he looks back, like I was reading, it says he looks back at the VMA night, how he went too far and they try to pull him back in. But like for me, the cool part about the track is, and because I'm not a musician, this is the best way I can describe it, is while the chorus is playing, like where he's like, falling from grace or I've been away too long, the guitar bends in there. And it's like kind of cool how both kind of are there, and that's what I really enjoy in the track. But yeah, man, it's a great opening track, preps you up, gets you ready. So an A plus for me.
Okay, Anurag?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think one of the first things that did sort of strike me was the fact that Bran was doing vocals on this album as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
and like something that he carried forward into all the other Mastodon albums. Like, and that there's just multiple voices on this, maybe one additional voice. And yeah, dude, like I was just thinking about how I don't know, this time when I was sort of revisiting it, like I realized the snare almost sounds like a whip, like it there's a very different tone to it, and obviously there's so much going on in this track that you sort of maybe don't notice those sort of things the first time. But yeah, man, like I mean, just the pace at which it goes is so classic Mastodon, so it's A plus for me.
Okay. Okay. Oblivion is not a perfect track, but it does its job to open the album and then some. I think it does a very good job, rather, of introducing you to Mastodon's evolved sound on this album as such. It's spacey, it's floaty, there's a lot of harmonization and melodies on offer beyond the riffs. The guitar slides, etc., that you spoke about, Peter, that's all that is just melody. It's not stereotypical heavy metal as such. um, all of those, I think, are the elements of the track that really pop out for me. And as Anurag said, this track was the official debut of drummer Bran Taylor as the band's third lead vocalist. And think it's a great decision because it's great to have more range. And also, I can live without the nasally whining voice that usually accompanies my Mastodon album. I have to mention the music video, which I think is a great
Yeah.
watch. But considering all things said, I'm not ranking this an A plus, but it still gets an A from me.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, so that's a fair opening. All right. Okay, moving on to track number 2, Divinations. Anurag, take this.
Well, man, I think this was the lead single from the album. So I remember it was like 3.5 minutes or something like that. And it was not surprising because obviously Mastodon do have songs in that range. But considering the opening song was like about 5.5, something more than 5 minutes, like to suddenly like jump back into a 3.5 minute song was, I guess it was just Mastodon sort of showing off that like this is us at full strength, like like that we can still make a lead single, put it on rock radio and stuff like that. So it's still an absolutely incredible like sort of experience here, like even the first time I heard it. So just the pace at which it goes, and just like those wide open riffs that like sort of, again, like I said, like maybe they were aiming to just write big ass riffs. So I think that definitely shown on this track.
Okay, so what's your verdict?
Oh, it's A plus.
Ooh, okay. I've rated this an A minus. Huh. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Yes, it is the shortest track from the album, and it was their lead single. And as you said, no surprises that this became their lead single, even though you can have 5 minute songs as your lead single. But here's why I think they chose it to be their lead single. It's heavier, it seems tighter, and I think it's just more old school sounding than the rest of the record. You there are hints of the vibe of Crack the Sky as such of that album, but not really a lot of them. So it's also, I mean, overall in the whole album, I don't think it's the most memorable track either. But it's still a solid track when you do listen to it, and especially it holds true um, more as a single as such. So yeah, that's why Definitions gets A minus from me. Peter?
So A plus. I mean, you got that banjo intro, which
Yeah.
now by then they play around with the intros and stuff like that. But then bam on, man. I mean, for me the highlights is the riffs that they play during the bridge where they go like "No escape, bridge," and you want to sing along to that. And then of course the solo, which is towards the right after that, and then they just seamlessly back get again into the bridge and the chorus. So like for me, these 1-2, it's a great way to showcase that, hey, this is my single, this is my longer track. you know, I'm going to stop there because there's so much more I can go on, and I want to keep for the rest of the tracks, really.
Okay, cool. So we still have pretty much so far the openers are all A's. Moving on to track number three, Quintessence. Peter, start this one off.
So, that noodly kind of intro that they have, it's so
Mm-hmm.
freaking catchy, and it just
Mm-hmm.
keeps repeating to the song. And even like
Uh,
for me, when I was reading the lyrics, and again, probably when you know a story or the background, like he says, the demon's skin is covered in fine mist. Open his hand in my hand, holding my eyes to the future, hovering above myself. I mean, like, this is just like him reliving the entire experience and stuff. But for me, the highlight is the hook, which is letting go, letting go. Like even
mm,
now, without the music or anything, you just
Hmm.
kind of sing along to it. So yeah, man, another A plus track for me.
okay. Anurag?
Yeah, man. I mean, I feel like this was the track that sort of after they sort of lure you in with the familiar Mastodon sound. Like Quintessence is the track that um, I think begins to tell you that this is a prog album, or at least that I mean, you can argue that this is a prog album. It just sort of like envelops you, like that way, like this, just the way the whole. The way the track moves, and I think what I noticed more when I revisited this album was that there's like a really grisly sort of like growl that goes on towards the end of the track, which, like, I mean, again, like Peter said, like you just find new stuff when you sort of like
Yeah.
really listen to it. So that was a surprising find on revisiting this album, which was, in a good way, because yeah, I guess, there's a growl, and at the same time, it starts off with this very prog vibe. So you can tell that it's Mastodon still sort of like trying to straddle both worlds in a sense. So yeah, it's an A for me.
Okay. Um, I was actually kind of divided on this. I was weighing between a B positive or an A minus. Okay, and here's my rationale for it. I'm not a huge fan of the vocal processing in the final part of the song.
Mm, mm,
I think it takes away from immersing yourself in the track, which so far all the other tracks manage to do. They have that excellent production, which completely lets you be part of the song, right? It envelops you. And then suddenly that vocal processing comes on for some reason, and I'm thrown off. Um, but that's really nitpicking. I love the drum work on this particular song because it's truly impeccable. There's so much going on. It's you really have to pay attention to what is going on to be able to actually make sense of it musically and appreciate the musicianship that's shown on here. Um, Especially on that one particular section where the guitars aren't chugging and instead you get that superb ambientish kind of a section. That's really the part that is the highlight. And I think that part on its own deserves so much of respect and so much and showcases so much of craftsmanship, which is why I'll concede that it is worthy of an A minus. I'm still
nice.
keeping hopes alive on this. I can see Peter definitely wondering what the fuck is anime smoking today.
Trust, trust me. When I was doing this, I was very torn apart later on in the album. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Wow.
Next up, we have track number four, which is the SAR. And allow me to start off this one off. This is the 10-minute, 54-second long song. The song itself, of course, it's broken up into four parts, or rather has four timestamps to it. And these in order are Usurper, Escape, Martyr, and Spiral. Overall, I freaking love this song. I love how well it's structured and measured. Sections take their own sweet time to build and then easily flow into one another. It's restrained, but it's again one of the key words that I will keep repeating a lot for the rest of the album and for how this album is produced and how it sounds is the key word there is immersive. It's truly immersive. The heaviness of the usurper or the second part of the song completely complements the lightness or spacey vibe of the first part. and then in comes Martyr and Spiral, and this part is the highlight of the whole track for me. It's goosebump inducing every time I listen to it. It's that entire part, from Spiral Out from the Crack in the Sky to the guitar solo to returning to what is now deemed or can be seen as the chorus of sorts of the song as such is just beautiful. It's a very rare feat to have a song leave you wanting more of the same thing. And I think on this one, Mastodon definitely achieved that. So for me, this one is a double plus completely. Anurag.
I'm glad you say that, man, because like I feel like this was um, obviously the song arrives at a point which is sort of the centerpiece of the album. So like I really, the way it starts and just like the whole journey of it is so great in that like I mean it kind of reminded me of their other instrumental songs like Great Catcher a little bit, just like in the sense of how they use those instrumental portions, which I mean, I guess in a Mastodon album you are expecting maybe an instrumental song, but to like to just see like a 11-minute song, and it starts off with a lot of instrumental stuff. Like I guess it would have surprised a few people, but I think by this point I guess Mastodon are just saying that just trust us on this, and we'll take you along. And I think like it's so worth it by the time the song gets over. And I think actually like the best parts for me personally are the way it starts and the way it ends. The stuff in the middle, it feels a little played safe in terms of just like how prog songwriting has sort of worked. Like maybe if you're familiar with prog rock and prog metal, like it feels like that. But yeah, like just the ending and the beginning of the song is what makes it for me. So I'm gonna give it a minus.
Okay, cool. Peter?
Okay, so the first time I heard this, I wasn't like back then like a prog guy, right? Like I would hear like probably the most prog I'd heard back then was like Opeth or something like that. So when you tell me a band like Mastodon's doing a 11-minute track right in the middle of the album, you're like, okay, what is this like? But I still remember the first time listening to it, and I have this friend, shout out to him, Watson. Both of us, I think, were sitting together and listening to this track, and he was like so into it. I was just going like, okay, what's next? And then it keeps going, and it just by the end of it, you're so enveloped in it, right? And that's one of the things, like you said, it's so immersive, right, Animesh? It just envelopes you. By the end, and it the full circle it comes. That was the really cool part. But again, for me, the second part, right, Escape, it's such a smooth transition they've got. Then you have a solo in the last part in Spiral around the 8-minute mark. I mean, you don't expect, if you think about it, like a solo right at the end over there. And at this point, these guys have like kicked out the complete song structure that you have and stuff like that. So by this point, you're just like, okay, they've thrown out the rule books. They've done the single. So this kind of gets featured in there. But if I just had to listen to this track alone, like as a standalone EP, I would, man. I would just like go back because you want to get that whole feeling, get into that story. So for me, double A plus.
Lovely,
Sorry,
lovely.
A plus
A
plus.
double plus. That's yeah, and I completely agree with you on that. This track can uh can be an EP of its own, of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, nice. So we're halfway through. Good job so far. Everything still being kept as an always looks promising, which leads us to the next one, which is Coast of Carolia. Peter, start this one off.
I alluded to this in the start. This was the tough one for me because, like, let's put it on any other albums, like the earlier albums or later albums. Yeah, okay, it's a Mastodon track. But then on an album like this, right? And when you have like 3 great tracks, then you've got this epic track, like I've tagged it, then you have this. Why did it need to be there? Like at this point, like it's one of those tracks if I had to like listen to it, and if there wasn't like somewhat of a segue or a transition, I'd just like hit forward. And I mean, like there is that whole spacey vibe again. the lyrics, the opening lyrics, where he says like wrathful one, nine eyes gaze, holding skulls filled and laced with human blood. It's like, okay, what is he talking about here? Like, where is this fitting in the story, right? In a way. But yeah, I mean, like probably on any other album, depending on where it came, I would probably rate it. But this was tough, and this is the first B on this album for me.
Okay, I'm glad you're saying that so that I don't have to be the villain here because I too rated a B minus. I think it's the weakest song on the album.
Yeah.
But then again, I think it's also because Mastodon themselves are just letting off some steam after that marvel of a track just before. That being said, I love the bass work and how much it's being used as an instrument just to harmonize all that's happening with the guitar as well as with the vocals. I think the bass, it's going all over the instrument, which is great. It's also a bit darker in terms of its mood. I also think it's somewhat of a placeholder or a connector of sorts between the songs. It succeeds and it precedes. Could this have been done better? I definitely think so. Is this required on this album? I do think so too. Like, I do think the song is required, but I think it could have been crafted a lot more stronger, which is why I'm going to leave it as a B minus here.
Like I do agree that what Peter said about just the opening lyrics and stuff, how they're referencing something that just sort of comes out of somewhere else, I suppose, or just maybe isn't the best transition after you created like a mammoth track like the Tsar. So, but I still feel like I enjoyed the lyrics overall. Maybe just because. I was thinking about more in terms of the lyrics, and actually because the Sonics didn't offer too much in terms of something different. Like, I mean, yes,
Interesting.
it is heavy, it's thundering, it's got all those great production sort of feats going for it. But yeah, overall, I guess yeah, I do agree. And for some reason, I think Mastodon considered this track one of their favorites, surprisingly, because
Really?
like when I saw them on the Hunter tour in 2012, they only played two songs off Crack the Sky, and one was this one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I don't remember it. So I had to look it up on the set list to make sure that, yeah, that was what they played. So maybe this is one of those tracks that, a band like holds on to because they just, maybe one person got like that veto and decided to keep it on the album. But yeah, even for me, I would say a B, I guess.
Okay. Okay, cool. We've got the votes in, but since you mentioned the live thing, I just needed to ask you, where was this track placed in their set list?
Oh, this was towards the
Wait,
end.
1 second. Before you answer that, I would reckon that this would be placed in the second half of the set list in between solid hits. Am I right?
Yeah, you're kind of right, because I guess they did it for
Like it's a deep cut.
yeah, I guess so. But it did sort of like come up around the same time as Crack the Sky as well. So like it was almost back to back, I remember. And or at least in the vicinity. But I think it came up in the middle of the set, basically. Like just bang in the middle between all the Hunter songs, actually. So it was quite surprising. But again, like I said, I mean, I just don't remember it for some reason.
I think the song's purpose, like sonically speaking, I would think that this is a song which uh, forces you to kind of take a break, and that's not a bad thing.
Hmm.
But anyways, it's not a strong enough song on its own, which is why it's getting a round of Bs. Moving on then, track number 6 is the eponymous Crack the Sky. Peter.
Yeah, and so I'm really glad like they come back with this one. And when you go through the track and what it's about, I mean, Anurag already alluded to it. This is about drummer Brandela's sister, who is Skye, and so each one kind of has their own thing. Like it means different things for different people, but like the bridge, right? after the third chorus, which goes violin soul under my control. So that really like reached out to me. Violin soul takes its final toll. Also, like straight after in the fourth verse, where like, and of course I forgot to mention earlier, but you've got Scott Kelly, who makes his like mandatory appearance now on a Mastodon album. But where he goes, and you can actually feel the anguish in his voice when he says, "Mama, don't let them take her down, at least alone." And that really, really kind of rips you. So quite an emotional track. What a way, like right after the previous track. So for me, this is again another A plus.
Okay. Anurag?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think is possibly debatable, but I think this might be Mastodon's best sounding song to date. Like at least in terms of like maybe if you make like somebody hear it on like a really good pair of headphones or something, like I think there's no doubt that they would instantly fall in love with what's going on, because everything just sounds incredible on this track. And I do remember watching this track live, not so much Ghost of Karelia, but I remember this one because it just sort of put me in a daze. And revisiting the album, it felt the exact same way. That it's just such a powerful sort of song that's very magnificent, which is, I guess, like how, again, like maybe that's something that Mastodon were sort of aiming for all along. Like even if you see their visual aesthetic and the album art and things like that, like it's sort of aiming for that sort of magnificent, sort of like regal kind of vibe. So I think this track like brought it out like incredibly. It's definitely an A plus for me.
I'll be the contrarian once again, but for me, this is an A minus, and that's only because of the other songs which I've already rated A pluses. Um, I agree, it starts off superbly. I think Scott Kelly's vocals add some much needed gnarliness or texture of sorts, and they fit in really well, and they both complement as well as contrast the rest of the band. Um, there's the fantastic solo section towards the end of the song, just before the chorus, which I love. Um, I I'm not a huge fan of how mid-paced as such the song is, but then again, because it has such an emotional story attached to it, I think that is the right decision. And again, yes, it does a beautiful job of just enveloping you as a listener. So yeah, but it's not my favorite of the album at like by a long shot, which is why I'm going with an A minus on this.
Fair enough.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Anyways, moving on to the last track, the last Baron. Allow me to start this one off. Yes, this is the 13-minute long song. It's the longest one on this album. And to me, this one is the second best song here. And yes, I think by now you guys have, and everyone that's listening actually, has kind of realized that I'm a huge fan of world building or just, mood building of sorts, and hence the longer tracks. And this one does, again, a beautiful job. I love the melodies in the first part of the song. I love the overall vocals, because I think it's only on this song that the signature Mastodon vocal style really shines as such. The second riffier part of the song is a great change of pace, but I still think it could have been a bit more heavier. Really give you an in your face kind of punch you out of the guts kind of a feel, which I think would have supremely contrasted to a greater degree to the other parts of the song. And then, of course, the slight pause comes in before that finale, and oh my god, what a finale section that is! That part is such an earworm. It's such a trip. I must say that when I rediscovered this album, this section was the one that haunted me, and of course, in a good way. It came to me in my dreams. It came to me while I was working. It stayed with me for a really, really, really long time. The only part that I don't enjoy is the way the song ends, because it's just too damn abrupt. So yeah, I'll sum it up in two words: A plus. Peter.
Man, so when you listen to like the Sa, right? You think, okay, chal, they've like done the long song. What more can they bring? How much longer? And then you end an album on a 13-minute track. Uh, Previously, I've said this on another episode about Periphery, right, where they did like a 13-minute opening track on the album. This is like who ends a track album on such a thing? And if you think about it, both those tracks are like kind of half the album almost. But coming back to the last Baron, for me, that crazy part around the 6-minute thing where you're just trying to figure out what the hell he's playing, like what instrument is he playing, is that on a guitar, like or is this like a feature, what's going on in there, and it just comes out of nowhere. It's like kind of like this, they call it like the free jazz part, but I was like, okay, wow. And then of course the solo at the end, but then like there's so much variety in the track that it keeps you engaged. Okay, what's coming next? Okay, they have that ebb and flow and stuff, so that's cool. But then I agree with Animesh, by the end you're just like, that's it. Like the track's over now. And especially when you're listening it, I remember I had like a Discman when I used to listen to this album. You're listening to it and you're like, what, album's over? Like what's going on, right? So but still, I mean, for me, this is again an A plus. I mean, I still, when I was listening to this now, I was like, what the hell were these guys thinking while sequencing the album, putting this like right at the end? It's like, let's just mess with them. So yeah,
Okay.
come on, Anurag.
Okay, Anurag, round this
Yeah,
one
that's
up.
true. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the whole song is quite overwhelming in the tones that it uses and just the way it progresses in general. Like again, like I never thought about like how it was sort of closing off this album, maybe because it's such an epic scale album. You're just sort of maybe by the last track you're very aware that it is the last track, and I guess, yeah, so you have those sort of expectations attached to it. But yeah, like I felt like this was also Mastodon at their most prog once again, and just sort of like doing all those guitar noodly things and stuff like that. Uh, all that just sort of strengthens the fact that they were trying to make like trying to aim for real greatness, I suppose, whatever that means for Mastodon in 2009. But like there's a switch that comes in it. I think like the 8.5 minute mark, which really again like just amazed me. Again, like you said, like Animesh said, like there was something that just like stayed with him, haunted him in a good way. Like this part was the same thing for me, that you sort of hear it and that, yeah, like this is why this album is considered one of the greats. So yeah, like it was quite and I think what's very evident on this song as well as just like throughout the album is that it's intense in a different way. So yeah, but I want to talk about that in more of my concluding remarks. So, but yeah, for now this gets an A plus still.
So there you have it. We've gone through the whole album song by song, and yes, unfortunately, this is not an all A's album because we all uh, agreed that there was a B track here. There could have been more, but I just thought I'd be a good guy today.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay,
I'm gonna say I'm gonna say thank you to the Bhayanak Mod guys.
Okay, cool. But before we get into concluding remarks, I quickly want to take note of two aspects of this album that definitely need to be talked about. One of which is production, and the second of which is artwork. And allow me to talk about the production first. I love how well this record is produced. Brendan O'Brien did a fantastic job behind the boards. Everything is superbly balanced. And for a record which has, so many fluctuations and changes in vibe in terms of songwriting, uh, all of it sounds extremely immersive. There's that word again. And more than immersive, it's all cohesive, so major props to them. I'll have to mention that everyone must get the deluxe version of this album because it has all the tracks minus the vocals as well. And that's the score as such. And because I'm not a huge fan of Mastodon style vocals, I spend more time listening to this score karaoke version instead. And I think it's just as good, if not better, than with the vocals on. Do you guys want to add anything about the production here? Do you guys agree?
Didn't Brendan O'Brien do like a lot of like the new metal stuff and all of
Yeah, he
that? So
did.
like it's kind of like a ballsy move. And if you think about it, like till then, Mastodon were like sludge, and with the whole Neurosis association and stuff like that, right? So if you told anyone back then, I mean, like we were young, impressionable metalheads, but you said that, hey, Brendan O'Brien is producing this album, which is going to like turn heads for sure. But it so fits in. I mean, like this is like I would hate to hear this album on like bad production or like not with all these elements, because it's so cool. Like Animesh said, even I loved listening to the instrumental sometimes because it just feels like a journey. I mean, I hate to use this term, but it's a proper trip when you're listening to it without the vocals, right?
Yeah, that's true, man. I mean, I've already touched upon the production parts, I guess, in different songs. So, yeah, I've said my piece.
All
Artwork.
right.
Who wants to go for artwork?
Okay, let me start this one off. I rated an A plus on artwork too because I really like it. I don't think it's my favorite Mastodon album artwork. That actually goes to Once More Around the Sun because I love how just really balls out and colorful and trippy that one is. But this one's a bit more somber. It has multiple layers and details, and yeah, that's all I'll say about that. It makes for something to lose yourself in.
Yeah, it's true. I quite liked it also. Like it was quite. I think I have it on CD if I'm not wrong. But yeah, it was just yeah, one of those albums that you can probably just like open up, look up the inlays, and just sort of like properly sit with it while you read the lyrics or listen to the music.
I'd love to own it on a T-shirt. I think, but I haven't yet found a good Mastodon print in the
Mhm.
country.
Good luck with that. But yeah, man, I mean, I quite enjoyed the artwork. I mean, again, it considering that Once Around the Sun came much later, and like
Hmm.
I own that on CD, and surprisingly it was like printed, you had a CD quite affordable in India, so I think I picked it up on Amazon or something like that. But yeah, this was quite cool. And the thing about Macedon, right, is like they're such a visually driven band in a way. Like you watch their videos, it kind of gets you into the whole vibe of what the song is about. I mean, like the opening track, Oblivion, has like a space whole thing, right?
Yeah, that's an outstanding music video.
Yeah, yeah.
Really good one. Okay, cool. So, having gone through almost all the facets, it's time for concluding comments. Let me begin this one here. I think for the first time on all A's, I think our methodology is flawed in a way. And I say that because I truly think that this album, even though I rated so many of the songs as either A minuses, very few A pluses, but and maybe it's just also as to when we are recording this, but at least I'm not orally sounding extremely excited about this, like how I've sounded about previous songs when we've done all A's albums, etc. But putting all of that aside, I still think this is an album which is truly outstanding. And this is one of those albums where the sum of the parts is much, much greater
Each
than
song.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, than its own. Right? It's a trip, it's a journey that you take with the band. I also think this is one of those albums that truly changes you or can change you if you give it the respect it deserves. It's one of those albums that I've deeply connected with. Um, it's a masterpiece. And for that reason, I think this album deserves an honorable mention as an all A's album, even though technically and literally it's not.
I when Anurag messaged us, right, and said let's do this album, I was like, yeah, blind, like, boss, this is definitely going to be an all A's album and stuff like that. But considering what we do, go with track by track and go into the lyrics, go into all of this and all, it suddenly makes you think that, wait, there was like a couple of tracks where you weren't sure. And I guess this is a sum of, all the years of listening to much different music, a variety of music, and now listening to Mastodon's later stuff also, I guess.
No, I don't think the later era of Mastodon has colored me any
Hmm.
negatively as such with regards to this album, but I wouldn't give any weight to that opinion actually. But that being said, I think the memories and the kind of connect that we all seem to have with this album is something that truly elevates it to one of the best albums for us. And
I agree.
I don't think it winning an all A's album tag is needed because it has
Hmm.
already surpassed that. It's like it's like what Odin tells Thor in Thor 3, I think, yeah, in Ragnarok, where Asgard is not is not like the place, but Asgard is the people. All his album is format, but it should be applied because it's for the people at the end of.
Yeah.
Anurag, are we making any sense?
Yeah, sort of, man. Like, I mean, I guess you can throw in a few Marvel universe references.
References.
Sure, it's totally fine. I mean, after all, I think like Mastodon did like a Jonah Hex soundtrack. I think they were on that. Vaguely some weird connection going on there. But like, I feel like it's important to talk about like how the legacy of this album was that that it, like I said in the beginning, like critics considered it one of the best metal albums of the decade. And I think when anybody sort of like thinks about maybe Mastodon's best album, they are gonna put forward "Crack the Sky," and I think it's dangerous when critics and fans say that like I mean they're sort of implying, right, like hey, they can't do better than this. So um, like I still think like everything that came after this was still quite decent, but "Crack the Sky" remains. I'm gonna use another M word here. It's "Crack the Sky" remains their magnum opus.
Yeah.
And like I can see why like uh, the way we've done like all A's before. Like I mean, I did want to bring that up as well, that the previous ones that you guys have got me on for have been quite all out heavy angry albums, like Gallows, Pantera, Rage Against the Machine. But this one is I guess it holds more emotive weight, so emotional intensity. So yeah, thanks for doing it.
So you can tell who's really picked the albums now.
Hey, come on! Just because I play in a hardcore punk band or a black
Black.
metal band doesn't really tell you anything about my music choice. anyways,
Oh, wait.
anyways,
So I should conclude with this because Metal Injection, not a site I read a lot, has a great thing where they say that Mastodon has been working on new material and it's kind of going to be metal.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, this is something we should definitely come back and debate. It's somewhere down the line whenever their new music is out.
Yeah, endless debates.
that's an endless debate. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But I also agree with Anurag on this that I don't know at this point in time because of their of all the stuff that they put out after Crack the Sky, if Mastodon will ever go back to the mind space they were in for Crack the Sky. And I think it's completely also not justified for
Yeah.
us to expect another Crack the Sky.
Forgive me for making this parallel, but can anyone expect Opeth to go back to the earlier sound at this point?
Hey, if Enslaved is showing signs of going back to its past, and Isan is showing signs of going back to his past, then
Yeah, some
maybe,
some Scandinavian scenes are going on, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pandemic.
On that note, again, this has been an absolute pleasure. Anurag, thank you for continuing to join us on these all A's and for choosing such a beautiful album which everyone should definitely listen to, even if you're not a Mastodon fan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been great.
Yeah. Thanks,
All right.
Anurag.
Anurag, do you want to quickly leave your social media deets so that people can follow you
Oh,
and
wait.
the subscriber base?
Please.
And you're on
I have to do
Instagram too now.
Yeah, that's true. I just joined Instagram because somebody, I guess some people wanted me there to do like live streams and live chats and stuff like that. So I was just gonna deactivate it, but they said, hey, you should. They made me swear on on during the live chat that I would stay on Instagram. So I am.
Do you have a
on-
recording of the live chat?
I should look at
I'm
that.
giving you a way out.
Unfortunately, I do have a recording of the live chat. But yeah, I'm on Instagram as Anurag Tagat at Anurag Tagat, and same thing on Twitter at Anurag Tagat. So yeah,
Hashtag no longer a hashtag.
that's true.
And of course, everyone, you guys know the drill by now. I keep repeating the same phrases over and over again. That's because you guys just don't seem that you are listening. It's still honsubpod.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter. We're at honsubpod. I'm at Azmoani.
And I'm Trend Crusher.
Until the next time, horns up.
Horns up.
Hands up.